replace, all of these things that it takes from an O&M standpoint and regulatory compliance. And then we look forward. So for the city of Rockport, I think their biggest issue is that they've got about 38 miles of steel that they're gonna have to replace based on this Texas rule. And they're looking at over $15 million that they're gonna have to be budgeting in the next 10, 15 years. And they decided, they just didn't wanna go that route. And that's what I help you gather the information so we know, because we've already been replacing a lot, but I don't know how much we have to replace. Do we have, how many steel lines do we still have to replace in PVC?
About
7 miles.
7 miles. So we would calculate what that is. City of Port Aransas just replaced their entire system and it cost them about $143,000 per mile. Because it's all in developed area. So those are the things that I bring when I work on this. And then you can decide, okay, we haven't been doing enough with calibrating our meters, doing this or that, replacing pipe and things of that nature. Do we want to go the next step? To go to the voters? Or do we keep it and we keep it and then we have to look at raising rates and doing issuing bonds, whatever you decide as a governing body to keep the system sustainable. That's all that's what you would hire me, is to work with your staff to gather y'all information so you can make a decision one way or the other. That's all.
Hold on a second, was there anybody else? Okay, Councilman Leon.
Thank you. So I understand what you did in 2014 because myself as well as Mr. Rodriguez were both in council at that time. And I know the study you did then is because of the losses we had and the compliance we had to go with the not TCQ, but the Railroad Commission.
Mhm.
I, for one, I can tell you right now, I'm not for selling any utilities. I believe in sustaining what we have and gaining revenue. I've always been like that and I'll always be like that. Now, part of that is when you want to do something like that, you got to do a lot of maintenance. You got to keep up with maintenance. You got to calibrate the way you should calibrate in order to get correct readings and be accurate on what you're bringing in and what you're sending out. For instance, we get charged I believe we get charged BTU, and we sell by, what do we sell to the client? We sell it in a different format, right? MCF. So we got something here and we're going something out this way. So we gotta make sure, I understand the finance part of it because we might be losing, and basically it might be in the transfer of the units. Because we're buying in a certain unit, selling in a certain different unit. So if rates gotta go up because we're spending more coming here and we're giving out more here, then so be it. Yes, this is for the citizens and so be it, but you have to not put the burden on the people that use gas on the people that don't use gas, because in essence, when you do that and you keep the rates down, the entire taxpayers pay for it versus the consumer. So I think that a study should be done on the financial side so we could determine whether it is the switching of the hands of the units or is it actual meters being not calibrated. And it's something that could be done in conjunction where we can actually start checking on the meters. We could actually start pipeline. It could be pipeline. I know that we had several, I think we replaced, 7, 8 miles? 7 for pipeline. You know, it could be that. It could be the AMRs. It could be the actual meter. It could be many things. And it could be as simple as we're being charged this in BTUs, but we're actually, when we're doing our conversion, it's not matching up. So, I mean, the financial side, I believe, needs to be the study, which we do it in-house or we do it out-house, but something needs to be done. As far as selling it, I'm against. That's just my opinion. Of course, there's 7 other people that can voice their opinion. But that's all I had to say.
Thank you. With that, guys, I think we pretty well hashed that out. And so we've got a motion on the table in a second. So a vote in favor is to employ Mr. Pena, and a vote against is to do this in-house. We will bring this back. You guys will see this because it's an issue we need to know. So with no other questions, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand so I can see it.
Can we do a second motion after this one fails?
Well,
If it fails?
So, all right, one more time, a vote for? Okay, a vote against, everybody raise your hand. It is unanimous against, okay. Mr. Payne, thank you very much, I appreciate it, thank you so much for coming down and lighting us. Okay, I will allow a comment, what is your question, Mr.
So
Ray?
what I wanna do is I wanna perform an in-house study and then bring Mr. Peña out his
Okay,
offer.
here's what we'll do, we have at the end, we have other announcements, and I'm gonna have you mention that, so we can bring that before the council. Just make a note of that. All right.
Mayor, I have a
okay.
quick comment with that motion. With that motion, because this is a motion that just took place, how we're doing the Robert's Rules of Order. If we went into discussion and we made a motion to discuss, then if that motion died, then we could bring Mr. Peña back. Since we voted against Mr. Peña, we can't, this motion can never be brought back because it was voted against. If we would've just made a motion to discuss, and Bobby, tell me if I'm correct, and nobody seconded the motion, then the motion is still alive. Am I correct?
So we can never again discuss the sell or to hire a consultant to check our gas lines.
Mayor Pro Tem is correct on the Robert's Rules of Order. As it relates to bringing this matter back, it can be brought back because if you were on the prevailing vote, the prevailing side, the
Can
winning
sign it
side of
back
the
on.
vote, then you can certainly bring it back. And
So if the motion wouldn't have got a second, it automatically died and anybody could have brought it
Right.
back. Now we have to wait to see the opposed brings it back.
Now, anybody
The
could bring
mayor
it
can't
back.
bring it back, or the city manager can't bring it back, it'd have to be 3 signature, because it was
Well-
voted on.
No, they can because any of you could, because of the ability of the mayor and the city manager to bring it back on, since the mayor's not voting, and the city manager obviously does not vote. But since all of you were on the winning side of the vote, anyone can change their mind to bring it back. So it can be brought back.
I just, I know when you don't get a second, I wanna know how that's gonna come into place if we go into discussion
Well,
afterwards.
Yeah, certainly, if it doesn't get a second, we don't discuss it, we move on. I mean, and that's the whole purpose of the first and the second, we don't wanna talk for 30 minutes and then nobody even second, it's motion and second, then we'll talk, and just like this, the desire of the council is not to proceed. So, we'll proceed, but anyway, we can certainly bring that back, so moving on, thank you guys, and as always, I appreciate the conversation, this is what it's all about. All right. So we are on item, I believe it's 8C, discuss bond debt obligations and the impacts on tax and utility rates. This is just for discussion, there's no action item. I'm gonna turn the floor over to our city manager.
Mayor and council, this is an item again just for discussion, again, leading into budget. Part of what I wanted to point out to the council, two things. If you look at page 29, if you look at column D, which is column D, row 9, you can see on there, and part of this is what we're paying in debt issuances, okay? There's been debt, part of what we talked about with Mr. Peña was debt that was issued also, for the replacement of these meters, which dates back to 2014. As I mentioned to previous councils, I think the city between 2007 and 2016 issued approximately $20 million in debt. That includes meters, that includes the 2016 bond issuance, includes the 2012 bond issuance. That you can all see in the packet. What you see here, when we talk about our INS tax rates and our property tax rates, you can see that on column D, what we pay just for debt service. It's $1.4 million, $1.74 million, primarily attributable to the two bond issuances I mentioned to you, which is 2012 and 2016. So when we start looking at tax rates, I just want to make sure that council is aware. If you look at item I-9 there on page 29, it's I is the column, 9 is the row. That is what the tax rate is to pay for that debt obligation. So I wanted to make sure that the council was aware of the debt payments, and what you'll see here, and I wanted to point out the other thing is in 2027, which is line 14, D there, you can see, excuse me, line 15, you can see where some of the debt payments start coming off, okay? So you see that it's $1.468 million, reduces down to $446,000. And the reason for that is that's when a bond payment it matures, we finish paying off debt. And part of what I wanted, again, is as the council starts making decisions on tax rates and utility rates, is to point out that this, right now, we're pretty much in the, as far as debt payments, we're in the greatest as far as the dollar amount of what we've been paying. What happens is with the debt structure is you can start out paying minimal payments and ultimately, and then what some people would maybe consider a balloon payment. Right now, we're at the balloon stage of making these payments. And again, these are obligations that prior councils have obligated the citizens to, and now the elected body. So if you look at page 31, you can see what our debt payments are for the 2012 bond issuances, our principal and our interest payment, which this year will be $720,000 for one bond issuance. You can look at our 2012A, and the other thing I wanted to point out is this, is you can see where some in the 2012A bond issuance, I believe that was done through a USDA. You can see where that pay structure doesn't end until 2052. And I wanted to point that out because what the councils, previous councils have done in years past, I guess the past 10 years, a lot of our debt structure is based on a 15-year period. So you have to pay those debts within a 15-year period, which is good in a way, bad in another way. Good in the fact that they get paid quicker. Bad is you can tell, you can see the amount of the bond that you're paying. So for instance,
Which bond was that? What year?
this was 2012A, page 32.
No, which bond year was that?
I believe it's the 2012 bond. Yes, ma'am. And so what you'll find there, if you look at our 2023 payment, we pay approximately $72,000 of payment for that. So you can see the difference that some of these bonds are carried out for a longer period of time, but again, the payment is a lot less. So when we start talking about debt structures and pay structures, this is something that as we move forward with potential issuances of future debt to look at is, do you want to carry a note out for 30 years? Do you want to carry it out for 15 years? And then how does it affect, taxes moving forward, taxes and or utility rates? So I just wanted to point that out to the council, and again, I felt it was important because I know that sometimes you guys get asked, well, how does this affect my taxes? How does it affect my utility rates? And all of this does affect both. And so you'll find the last thing is on page 23, is the 2016 bond issuance. This was issued, I believe it was over $8 million that was issued for debt in 2016. The debt payment for that this year is going to be approximately, actually $678,000 for debt. And so that's, again, I'm not going to, some of this is a bit repetitive, but it's put in a different format. But at the end of the day, all I want to point out to the council is that, there are some big payments that are looming that we're having to pay through property taxes and utility rates. And so if the last thing is, if you ever need any more information, the good report that I think is really good is on page 39. It's called the MAC report, and it provides all of our information as it relates to our property values, our debt obligation, and things of that sort. So I just wanted to point that out to the council, that information is there. And if you ever have any questions or have any questions about any of this, feel free to ask. That's all.
Mayor?
Just a real quick question. I'll give you, if you guys return to page 29, you can see the assumption is on column B, that's assuming that our tax base stays at 317 million. And just for you new council members, our tax rate is what, 86 cents? And so that 40 cents about of our ad valorem tax revenue is for debt service. So we operate on about $12 million a year. 1.4 million is what we pay for debt service. So maintenance and operations runs whatever that is, about 10.6 million, 1.4 is for debt. Of that, just real quick on the column G, the debt is supported by those, that 241,000, right, comes from utilities, so it's not exclusively funded by ad valorem taxes. So anyway, about half of our tax rate goes to this debt service, and so as we look at other things we need to do, that's what we need to consider. Fred, anyway, thank you, Brett, you had a question?
Yeah,
Councilman?
Fred, on the Rescue Act plan, the money that we got last year, the president gave it to us because we all are still living in a pandemic, and it's coming back.
Right.
And they foresaw that.
Yes, ma'am.
So they gave us how much last year?
1.3 million,
How much?
1.3.
Okay, they gave us $1.3 million. And when that Rescue Act plan came out, it came out because they wanted to take the burden off the taxpayers.
Mhm.
Okay, 'cause we're still suffering and a lot of us are still recovering
Okay.
from this.
Mhm.
And as we're recovering, we're still getting sick. Okay? And a lot of things have been pulled away from the people.
Mhm.
Are we getting the Rescue Act plan again this year?
Yes.
Okay? Because he foresaw it coming back again and said, we do not want to put the burden on the people.
Okay.
We had this discussion last year.
Okay.
I know that we have a debt services on it, that we were paying this much money. But at this time, it's we're still living in a pandemic. And the 1.3 million Rescue Act plan is to keep our taxes afloat another year,
Mhm.
to not put the burden back on the people that have lost their jobs, lost their family, lost loved ones, lost the providers of the home. And all those other years that you were reading back, I totally get it. I worked with other city managers where we put a 15-year bond. I had a 15-year bond that we approved. 2016, I don't know why he made it that long, but I understand how cities work, because that's how it goes.
Mhm.
But these years that we are living in, that we've lived in the last 3 years,
Mhm.
they're not normal.
Yep.
And we need to take in consideration that this pandemic isn't over, and just because we have a debt here, they given us 1.3 million again to hold off on that.
Mhm.
So I don't wanna put that 1.3 million to the side so we can polish it
Right.
and look what we have. No, we wanna put that 1.3 million, put it into place so we don't burden the citizens of Pearsall, the taxpayers that own homes, even the ones that don't own homes, that shop at our stores, the sales tax. Everybody gets affected that lives in Pearsall, Texas.
I agree.
Okay. Councilman Leon?
I agree as far as putting tax burden on people, but we as a council, we have to remember that also when we vote on certain things, and that we need to actually be conservative when it comes to giving things out or giving breaks on certain things. So if we're going to not wanna increase on one side, we need to be very diligent on the other side. And this goes for all of us as a whole, because we don't wanna put the burden on the general people.
And council, this is a good conversation. We are gonna get to discuss this spot on when we get into our budget in the revenue section. This will be a topic, but
And we
it's
gotta look at the
relative,
new
so
homes that
we'll
are
be able to
being
do
built.
that.
The new homes, if they're $250,000, you times that, my taxes went from 4,000 to 9,000.
Yeah.
If you're looking at $300,000 homes, we gotta consider the taxes. People stay in Pearsall because what they're used to, we understand that. And other communities, if they raise them, some don't, some do. And we gotta do what works best for Pearsall.
Yeah, I'm sure that's on everybody's mind. All right, thank you, council. We'll move on to item 8E, discuss and consider the creation of a youth advisory commission. It's a YAC for the city.
The event calendar.
Okay, pardon me.
Sorry.
Discuss, I'm sorry, go to item 8D, discuss and consider city-sponsored sport. So, city-sponsored events and event calendar for fiscal year 22-23. This is the action item. Call for a motion. Have a motion, please. I have a motion by Councilwoman Garza. May I have a second? I have a second by Councilwoman Hernandez. All right, at this point, I'm gonna turn the floor over to, is it Bianca?
Okay, so, city-sponsored events and event calendar, what we are sponsoring right now is the 4-H Clay Busters. Did they get this?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the packet.
Pioneer Days, Hispanic Heritage Festival, our Christmas event, the backpack giveaway, which is coming up, the toy giveaway, and, that's it. So in April is when the 4-H Clay Busters, happens. We don't do anything January, February, March. May is Pioneer Days, August is the backpack giveaway, October is the Hispanic Heritage Festival, and in December is both the Christmas event followed by the toy giveaway. So,